On a cold winter morning in Boston, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, Emily Johnson cradled her swollen belly with both hands while sipping her herbal tea. A gentle smile graced her rounded face, but deep in her eyes lurked an unspoken anxiety. Now in her 9th month of pregnancy, her heart was like a maze where love and worry intertwined as she faced the prospect of giving birth for the first time. "You look chipper this morning," Michael said as he appeared in the kitchen. Known as the owner of a construction company, his muscular build and confident demeanor told the story of his success. "The baby's been moving a lot this morning." "We'll meet him soon," Emily smiled tenderly. The Johnsons, now in their 5th year of marriage, were envied by others as the ideal couple. Their life seemed picture-perfect, a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, stable income, and the imminent arrival of their long-awaited first child. Emily had worked as a senior accountant at a major accounting firm, thriving on the front lines until she went on maternity leave. Her dedication to work had been rewarded with promotions but had also been a source of tremendous stress. "What's on your schedule today?" Michael asked while pouring his coffee. "I have an appointment with the insurance agent this morning. I'll finalize the list of baby items and plan to rest a bit in the afternoon." Emily had just enrolled in an expensive life insurance policy last month. At Michael's strong urging, he had explained it was for the family's security. The policy had a payout worth several times Emily's annual salary. "That's good. Don't overdo it," Michael said with kindness in his voice, though his eyes remained glued to his smartphone screen rather than on his wife. "Another business trip?" Emily was accustomed to her husband's busy schedule, but as her due date approached, she felt increasingly anxious about his more frequent absences. "Yes, the Chicago project still isn't wrapped up. I might have to go again this weekend." Emily said nothing. Michael's work was an important source of income that supported their lifestyle. She wrapped her warm tea with both hands and gazed out the window. Snow had begun to fall in the quiet suburban neighborhood outside Boston. "Did the doctor say anything?" Michael asked abruptly. "Everything's fine. The baby's position is normal, and I should be able to have a natural delivery as planned." Michael's face showed relief. "That's good. Our child will be born healthy, I'm sure." Emily smiled, but felt something odd about her husband's words. He had seemed unusually worried about her pregnancy lately. "Is something bothering you?" No. I'm just concerned because it's our first child." Michael hastily tucked his smartphone into his pocket. "Well, I'm heading out. Call me right away if anything happens." After he left the kitchen, Emily remained motionless for a while. Her intuition that something was wrong grew stronger. But maybe it was just the heightened emotional sensitivity of pregnancy. In the afternoon, Emily lay on the living room sofa, gently stroking her large belly. "We'll meet soon," she smiled. Her due date was still a week away, but her body seemed to be preparing already. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot from her lower back to her abdomen. Emily sat up and took a deep breath. It's still too early. But as time passed, the intervals between pains grew shorter and their intensity increased. With trembling hands, Emily called Michael. "Michael, please, come home. I think labor has started." 30 minutes later, Michael burst through the front door. His face was pale and sweaty. "Are you all right? Is your bag ready?" Emily nodded and headed toward the car with Michael's support. Each time pain seized her body, she gripped his arm tightly. "It's okay, Emily. We'll be at the hospital soon." Michael's voice was calm, but his eyes held an unnatural tension. Between contractions, Emily noticed her husband's strange behavior. He seemed rushed about something. However, the next wave of pain consumed all her thoughts. The car left the quiet residential area and headed toward downtown Boston in the twilight. As traffic increased, so did Emily's anxiety. Michael gripped the steering wheel tightly, occasionally checking the rearview mirror. Traffic jam, Michael bit his lip. I'll take another route. Emily nodded, her face contorted with pain. Michael's car left the highway that led to their usual hospital and continued onto less traveled roads on the outskirts of Boston. The snow gradually intensified, and snowflakes striking the windshield slowed the wiper's movement. During a break between contractions, Emily looked out the window and felt something was wrong. Michael, this route. It's to avoid traffic, Michael answered quickly. A shortcut to Bayview Medical Center. Emily had questions but had to focus on the next contraction. Her breathing became shallow and rapid as she cradled her large belly below the seatbelt. Fear and excitement about the baby's imminent arrival enveloped her. How much longer? She asked during a momentary easing of pain. Michael appeared focused on driving, but his eyes held a strange determination. Not long. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Emily studied Michael's profile. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his jaw muscles were tense. With her sharp accountant's eye for observation, honed over 10 years, she sensed her husband's unusual tension. It was different from the normal anxiety of a first-time father. The car was silent except for Emily's labored breathing and the rhythmic sound of the wipers. The dashboard clock showed 6 p.m. outside. Night had fallen, and snow-covered trees cast eerie shadows in the car's headlights. Suddenly, Michael's smartphone rang. He quickly checked the screen, and his complexion changed. Emily noticed his fingers trembling. Who's that? Emily asked between pains. Just work, Michael's voice was unnaturally high. He hastily tucked his smartphone into his pocket. Normally, Emily would have questioned this, but another intense contraction seized her consciousness. She took a deep breath to manage the pain. Michael, the baby's coming soon, hurry. I know, we're almost there, Michael accelerated. The car glided across the snowy road and rounded a curve. He frequently checked the rearview mirror, as if searching for something. Emily leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. In her mind, she continued her dialogue with her baby. We'll meet soon, very soon. Michael's hand reached for his smartphone to check a message. When Emily opened her eyes, she noticed his expression had completely changed. It was a mixture of fear, distress, and a strange resolve. Is something wrong? She voiced her concern. Michael turned his gaze to her. There was a coldness in his eyes she had never seen before. Nothing. At that moment, fear shot through Emily's heart. It was a completely different kind of fear from labor pains. She sensed something was terribly wrong. Her mind switched from anxiety about giving birth to sudden distrust of her husband. Michael focused on the road again and increased speed. The car continued racing along the deserted mountain road. Michael, slow down. It's dangerous, Emily's voice was tinged with fear. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed firmly ahead, seemingly deaf to Emily's pleas. The snow had turned into a blizzard, severely limiting visibility. Michael's driving was strangely calm, almost precisely calculated. Emily, overwhelmed with anxiety, tried to understand what was happening to her husband. Suddenly, Michael slammed on the brakes. Damn it! The headlights of an oncoming car appeared through the snow, heading straight for them. Emily was too terrified to scream. Her hands instinctively covered her belly protectively. Michael turned the wheel, but on the snow-covered surface, the car lost control and began to spin. Emily's vision filled with rotating scenery and bright headlights. She screamed her husband's name, but wasn't sure if the sound escaped her lips. At the moment of impact, the world went dark in an instant. The sound of twisting metal, breaking glass, and Emily's screams echoed through the quiet mountain road. Emily desperately tried to stay conscious. The impact had thrown her forward, with the seatbelt restraining her body firmly. Pain assaulted her entire body, and her head had struck the car door hard. However, her greatest fear was for the life in her womb. "Baby," she whispered faintly. As consciousness faded, Emily strangely felt her baby moving. As if telling her, "I'm okay," the small life moved inside her belly. That sensation gave her an odd sense of comfort. She heard sirens approaching in the distance. Emily tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt heavy. Her vision was blurred, and the smell of blood stung her nostrils. "Michael." She tried to locate her husband. Through her clouded consciousness, she saw Michael. He appeared injured, but Emily couldn't read his expression. Was it fear or relief? Paramedics rushed to her side, calling out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" Emily tried to answer but couldn't find her voice. She focused on staying conscious. Only one thought filled her mind: save my baby. Even as she was placed on a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance, she still faintly felt her baby moving. It was her only hope. Before losing consciousness completely, Emily saw Michael talking with the paramedics. He seemed to be pretending to be injured, but his eyes held a coldness she had never seen before. "Baby, safe," were the last words Emily uttered before completely losing consciousness. White light. That was the first thing Emily saw when consciousness returned. Squinting at the brightness, she slowly began to recognize her surroundings. The hospital ceiling, the smell of disinfectant, and the regular beeping of machines. Her body was wrapped in dull pain, but what concerned her most was her belly. "Baby." Emily squeezed the words from her dry lips. As she reached out to touch her stomach, an unfamiliar voice spoke. "Mrs. Johnson, you're awake." A man in a white coat stood by her bedside. He was in his mid-50s with distinctive black-rimmed glasses and well-groomed white hair. A name tag that read Dr. Richardson gleamed on his chest. "My baby?" Emily asked desperately. The doctor's expression clouded momentarily. "We're checking on the condition right now. First, let me examine you." He placed a cold stethoscope on Emily's chest and began checking her vital signs. Emily tried to read his expression but couldn't discern what lay beneath his professional mask. "Do you remember the accident?" the doctor asked while checking her pupils. Emily gathered fragmented memories. The snowy road, Michael's strange behavior, the oncoming headlights, and then the collision. She answered with a trembling voice. "What about Michael?" "Your husband has minor injuries. He's handling paperwork now," the doctor answered matter-of-factly. "Emily, we're going to do an ultrasound. We need to check the baby's condition." Emily's heart raced. She instinctively sensed something was wrong. "Is my baby okay? Is it moving?" she asked, her voice shaking. The doctor didn't answer, calling a nurse instead and instructing her to prepare the ultrasound equipment. Emily felt her body freeze with fear. This silence, the doctor's demeanor, everything indicated something terrible had happened. Cold gel was applied to Emily's abdomen, and Dr. Richardson began carefully moving the ultrasound probe. His eyes were fixed on the monitor. Emily tried to see the monitor too, but couldn't from her angle. "Can you see anything? Is my baby?" Emily's voice was filled with desperation. Dr. Richardson's expression changed. He frowned and began moving the probe more carefully. His eyes widened at something on the monitor. "This is..." he murmured softly. At that moment, the door opened, and Michael entered. A small bandage was on his forehead, and his arm was in a sling, but otherwise he appeared unharmed. His eyes immediately went to the monitor, and he exchanged a brief glance with the doctor. "Emily, are you all right?" Michael's voice betrayed concern, but his eyes remained fixed on the doctor. Dr. Richardson quickly changed the angle of the monitor and approached Michael. "Mr. Johnson, shall we talk in the hallway?" No, Emily said with sudden strength. Tell me what's happening right here. This is my baby. The doctor hesitated but returned to Emily's bedside. He took a deep breath and placed the probe on her belly again. Emily, this baby. He seemed to be choosing his words. Cannot be delivered because. At that moment, a small beating sound came from the monitor. Emily's eyes lit up with hope. A heartbeat. My baby is alive. The doctor's expression contorted momentarily. He exchanged glances with Michael again and subtly shook his head, as if communicating something. Mrs. Johnson, this situation is. As the doctor began speaking again, Emily's vision suddenly started to darken. She desperately tried to stay conscious, but felt her body becoming unresponsive to her will. Baby, help. Were her last words before consciousness sank into darkness again. The next time she regained consciousness, Emily tried to move but winced in pain. Her belly seemed smaller than before. Fear gripped her heart. Ah, you're awake. A young nurse noticed her and approached the bedside. Her name tag read Sarah Newman. My baby? Emily asked desperately. Sympathy flickered in Sarah's eyes. I'll call Dr. Richardson. Minutes later, Dr. Richardson entered the room with Michael. Michael's eyes were red and swollen. Emily's heart froze with fear. Emily, the doctor said quietly. I'm sorry, but we couldn't save your child. The words reached her ears, but it took time to understand them. What did you say? The impact of the accident caused placental abruption, and we performed an emergency cesarean section. However, the doctor seemed unable to continue. Michael took her hand. Emily, the baby died. Emily stared at Michael with disbelief. But I heard the heartbeat on the monitor. The baby was alive. That was temporary, Michael's voice trembled. The doctors did their best. Tears flowed from Emily's eyes. Her heart shattered, and she felt strength draining from her entire body. She placed her hand on her empty belly, thought of the small life that should have been there, and wept aloud. Michael tried to comfort her, but Emily pushed his hand away. Let me see my baby. Emily, that's. Michael stumbled over his words. Dr. Richardson intervened. You need to rest your body now. At the appropriate time, we'll tell you everything. Emily tried to protest but lacked the strength. She sank her head back onto the pillow and stared at the ceiling. She felt something was wrong. Something they were hiding. The doctor checked her for and adjusted something. You should sleep. It's necessary for recovery. Emily closed her eyes, but before falling asleep, she saw the doctor and Michael leave the room. Once in the hallway, they closed the door and began talking in hushed tones. She couldn't make out their words, but they resembled conspirators. As the medication began to take effect and Emily's consciousness drifted away again, she made a resolution. Something was odd. Michael's behavior, the doctor's attitude, and her own intuition. She needed to know the truth. But now, she had to regain her strength. Tears fell from Emily's eyes. Her arms embraced her empty belly. I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. Before completely losing consciousness, a faint question crossed her mind. If the baby had truly died, why wouldn't they let her see it? Why were Michael and the doctor having secret conversations in the hallway? And above all, was the baby's heartbeat she had last heard really just temporary? Before falling into a deep sleep, Emily vowed to herself to seek the truth. Her maternal instinct was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, Emily awoke to light streaming through the hospital room window. For a moment, she thought everything had been a nightmare, but the emptiness in her belly and the pain in her body reminded her of reality. Wrapped in a sense of loss and sadness, something still nagged at the back of her mind. The door opened gently, and Sarah, the young nurse from yesterday, entered. With a modest smile, she began checking Emily's vital signs. "Did you sleep well last night?" Sarah asked kindly. Emily shook her head. "Please tell me everything about my baby." Sarah hesitated momentarily, but something in Emily's earnest expression seemed to cement her resolve. She looked toward the door, then approached quietly and said in a low voice, "Officially, I can't speak about this, but your baby was initially in healthy condition." Emily's heart pounded fiercely. "What did you say?" "I was one of the first nurses to examine you when you were brought in. The baby's heartbeat was stable. But after Dr. Richardson took over." Sarah trailed off. "And then?" Emily leaned forward. "The surgery details deviated from standard protocol. When I tried to enter the operating room, the doctor sent me away and called another nurse. And the post-operative records are incomplete." Anger and fear flashed in Emily's eyes. "What happened to my baby?" Sarah shook her head with a puzzled expression. "I can't say for certain. I just thought it was strange. And then..." She looked toward the door again. "Your husband and the doctor had several private conversations. As if they had known each other before the accident." Various memories surfaced in Emily's mind. Michael's strange behavior, his wrong turn while driving, the message on his cell phone, and the accident. The horrifying thought that it all might have been intentional tightened around her heart. "Sarah, will you help me?" Emily steeled her resolve. "I need to know the truth." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah quietly nodded. "I'll do what I can. But we must proceed carefully." That afternoon, Michael visited the hospital room. He carried a bouquet and played the role of a grieving husband. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Emily observed Michael from a new perspective. His worried expression, trembling hands, sad eyes. Everything seemed like a calculated performance. "A bit better," she answered calmly. "Michael, could you bring my cell phone? There are people I need to contact." "Of course," Michael replied. "It should still be in the car. I'll go get it." As Michael left the room, Emily exchanged glances with Sarah, who was waiting outside her room. "Could you bring my bag too?" Emily called loudly. After Michael left the hospital, Sarah quickly entered the room. "We don't have much time. Dr. Richardson is in another surgery now. Look at this." She produced a tablet and showed Emily her medical records. Normally, emergency C-section records include all details. But in your case, crucial information is missing. There's hardly any record of what happened to the baby. Anger and fear spread through Emily's chest. But why? Why would Michael and the doctor? "I don't know," Sarah answered. "But I also found this." She scrolled the tablet to display the hospital staff list. "Dr. Richardson only came to this hospital 3 months ago. Before that, he worked in another state. And there's a record that your husband met him at a hospital charity event around the same time he arrived." Emily was stunned. Countless questions filled her head. The possibility that Michael had deliberately caused the accident, his conspiracy with the doctor, and the whereabouts of her baby. Suddenly, she remembered something important. Michael's cell phone. She gasped. Just before the accident, he received some message that upset him. Sarah quickly said, "Before he returns, there's something you can do. Your husband's locker should be in the hospital visitors' lounge. His belongings from the time of the accident are stored there." Emily made up her mind. "Will you help me?" Sarah nodded without hesitation. "I'll bring a wheelchair." 10 minutes later, Sarah wheeled Emily to the visitors' lounge, sneaking quietly. Fortunately, the place was empty. Sarah quickly opened the locker and found Michael's belongings. With trembling hands, Emily took out Michael's cell phone. The passcode was her birthday. She entered this number she had used many times before and unlocked the phone. Opening the messaging app, she saw messages from an unknown number. However, the sender's name was Kate. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Scrolling through older messages revealed an affair between Michael and Kate, Caitlin Richardson, Dr. Richardson's real name. And most horrifyingly, there were records of conversations about insurance money. $3 million in insurance, split half and half. But only if Emily and the baby die in an accident. Emily froze in terror. Tears flooded her eyes, and her hands trembled. The final message had arrived just before the accident. Change of plan. Just the baby. Keeping Emily alive will raise less suspicion. Emily nearly dropped the phone. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder for support. We need to contact the police, Sarah said quietly. With this evidence. Emily nodded silently, clutching the phone. Her heart was shattered, but at the same time, a strong determination for revenge was budding. She still didn't know where her baby was, whether alive or dead. But one thing was certain, Michael and Dr. Richardson had tried to take her life and her baby's. 6 months later, Emily stood in the solemn courtroom of the Boston District Court. Standing at the witness stand, she appeared thin, but her eyes held strong determination. In the defendant's seat sat her former husband Michael and Caitlin Richardson, aka Dr. Richardson. Michael wore a gray prisoner's uniform with slumped shoulders, but Caitlin still sat straight-backed as if asserting her innocence. Mrs. Johnson, please tell the court about that day, the prosecutor gently prompted. Emily took a deep breath and began recounting the memory of that horrible day. Michael's unnatural behavior, the accident, and the events at the hospital. With each word she spoke, sobbing could be heard from the gallery. My baby was actually. Emily's voice trembled. Healthy. They took my baby from me and killed it. For insurance money. The courtroom fell silent. The prosecution had submitted the cell phone messages, the hospital's falsified records, and Sarah's testimony as evidence. Even more surprisingly, during the investigation, traces had been found suggesting that Michael and Caitlin had attempted similar fraud in another state in the past. The trial's outcome was clear. Michael received a life sentence for first-degree murder and insurance fraud. Caitlin was stripped of her medical license and sentenced to 20 years as an accomplice. Their relationship also collapsed in court, with an ugly spectacle of them blaming each other. How are you today, Emily? In the bright living room of her new apartment, Sarah offered Emily tea. A year had passed since the trial, and the two had become close friends. Sarah continued her nursing work while helping Emily's emotional recovery. Getting better little by little, Emily smiled. On the table lay brochures for the grief counseling she was attending and materials from victim support groups. How's the new job? Sarah asked as she sat down. I find it fulfilling, Emily answered. After the trial, she had begun working with a non-profit organization supporting women experiencing pregnancy or child loss. Using her own experience to help women with similar pain had become her healing process. Outside the window, Boston's spring sunshine illuminated the fresh green of the trees. Emily glanced at the small tattoo etched on her arm. Her baby's due date and tiny angel wings. A memorial to the life she would never forget, a life that never had the chance to exist. Are you ready for next week's memorial service? Sarah asked gently. Emily nodded. Not perfect, but I've done my best. She stood up and picked up a small memorial box displayed by the window. Inside were ultrasound photos, tiny socks, and a card that read, Loved Forever. Sometimes, I can't believe it ended this way, Emily said quietly. But I'm truly grateful you've been by my side. Sarah, you're my family. Sarah smiled gently and put her arm around Emily's shoulders. You're my family too. The two looked down at the city from the window. Emily's heart still carried pain, but a new light of hope had also been born within it. She had fought for the life she lost and won justice. And now, she was learning to heal herself by helping others with similar suffering. Though blood ties were lost, Emily had found the true meaning of family. It was the bond with people who stand by you in difficult times and walk with you. Emily vowed in her heart to cherish that bond even more in her life ahead. As the evening light painted the room red, Emily and Sarah leaned on each other quietly, taking a step toward a new tomorrow.